Now, it's sometimes a struggle to decide which weapons you should and shouldn't use in Hypixel Skyblock. At the end of the day, everyone has different opinions on different weapons, meaning that you could speak to one person and they could say, oh, this weapon's really good and relatively cheap. You could talk to another person and they could explain that it is the worst weapon they've ever laid eyes upon. Now today we're going to be taking a look at a few weapons that you should use in Hypixel Skyblock if you're not sure what to use. These weapons from my point of view provide really good value for money. First up we have the Shadow Fury. The Shadow Fury is a melee weapon that has base stats of plus 300 damage, plus 130 strength, plus 30% crit damage and plus 30 speed. Its right click ability rapidly teleports you to up to 5 enemies within 12 blocks, routing each of them and allowing you to hit them. Cooldown is 15 seconds. Now the Shadow Fury has plenty of competitors. It first of all has the Livid Dagger, which is a fraction of the cost, at around about 15% of the cost of the Shadow Fury. The Livid Dagger giving you plus 210 damage, plus 60 strength, plus 100 crit chance, plus 50% crit damage, plus 50% bonus attack speed. It also has decent abilities on it too. Now you might think, well, is it really worth paying 45 million coins for an extra 90 bonus base damage? And I have to say, it probably is. As you look at higher tier weapons, it becomes a lot more expensive to upgrade weapons. For example, after the Shadow Fury you have something like a Felthorn Reaper, which is probably around about on par, but I don't think it's quite as good as the Shadow Fury. I mean, this is probably one of the most recent additions to the melee weapons. It doesn't deal as much damage, although it gives you plus 1 swing range. In my opinion, I think the Shadow Fury is better. But when you consider that basically the next upgrade for melee weapons after the Shadow Fury is a Giant Sword, and that is 100 million coins extra, the actual damage difference between a Shadow Fury and a Giant Sword isn't huge, but you've paid 100 million coins extra. I think the Shadow Fury is a nice middle ground, it's great value for money, and I would definitely recommend buying it if you need a good melee weapon. Okay, before we go any further, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel, it does help out a lot. And you should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer Slayers and Dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Anyway, moving on, next up we have the Ink Wand. It's a bit of an interesting weapon, however I think in your arsenal, realistically you're going to want a weapon that can deal a ton of basically one-hit damage. Majority of the time when you're looking at damaging weapons, you want things that deal good DPS, but sometimes you need something that can absolutely wipe something out in one hit. The Ink Wand gives you plus 130 base damage and plus 90 strength. The right click ability Ink Bomb shoots an ink bomb in front of you, dealing however much damage and giving you blindness. Mana cost is relatively low and the cooldown is pretty high. So let me demonstrate how this works. It's as simple as basically aiming at an enemy and right clicking. Do you see how much damage that did? I think I saw a hit for 6 mil and a hit for 5.6, but I'm going to retry it to just make sure. Okay, let's try again. 5.9 million damage for this pretty puny weapon. It'll cost you 10 million coins and realistically you don't really need many enchantments on it at all. I mean, the most of the damage is in your setup. Once again, it's not really good DPS. I mean, of course it has a cooldown of 30 seconds and it doesn't really have any other use. However, if you need to deal a lot of damage at once, I have a really good one-hit damage. Maybe if you want to kill a Slayer boss in one hit or something like that. I mean, of course, it used to be really good for Svens, but they made it so they don't take magical damage anymore. But for things like Tarantula Slayer, you can kill them anyway. But there is situations and scenarios around Skyblock. Okay, next up we have the Fire Veil Wand, a weapon that we can definitely not escape when talking about decent budget weapons. This is an absolute must-have. The Fire Veil Wand is base stats, plus 50 damage, plus 200 intelligence. Its right-click ability, Fire Veil, creates a veil of fire around you for 5 seconds, dealing however much damage per second to mobs within. Mana cost of 150 and a cooldown of 1 second. As I mentioned with the Ink Wand, how, it's not great DPS, however, one-hit damage on the Ink Wand is really good. Well, this is the complete opposite. Because essentially all we do is go into basically, it's most effective on a group of mobs because it hits multiple mobs at once. We right-click, and, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, I'm being completely honest. We still deal 1.4 million per tick, which is crazy. And of course, it literally just works completely off tick damage. Like, you don't have to do anything, it's almost passive, you just have to run near enemies and that is the end of them. The mana cost isn't actually that great considering you don't have to spam it. Overall, great weapon. I can't really say anything else about it. I do have ultimate wise on it and that's why the mana cost is so low. Otherwise it would be 300, but even at 300 it isn't too bad because once again you don't have to spam it. but something that is absolutely essential and will help you a lot at early game or just any point in the game is worth having. Next up we have the Juju shortbow, the second best bow in the game. The Juju shortbow gives us plus 310 damage, plus 40 strength, plus 10% crit chance, plus 110% crit damage, a shot cooldown of 0.35 seconds. Hits 3 mobs on impact, can damage enemy. Obviously it's a shortbow so it shoots instantly, it's not really like a conventional bow. Before the Terminator is the best bow in the game, and it is completely and utterly meta, and to be honest the price is really not too bad for what this weapon can do. For instance, even if we just buy a completely and utterly plain one, we can deal a whopping 470k with a plain. Just a plain Juju shortbow, which isn't bad. Of course that completely depends on your setup, your pet, magical power and everything else. However, there's plenty shortbows before it, for instance like the Dragon shortbow, the Spirit shortbow. None of them are really anywhere near as good as the Juju, to be honest. Now the price of 22 million is a very little price to pay. Of course the amount of coins that you pay for the Juju isn't really the main requirement, it's more it's more having Enderman Slayer 5, which of course requires you to do Enderman Slayer until you get to Enderman Slayer 5 or get carries. Of course, if you also pair the Juju with any Terra armor, even if you get the cheapest Terra armor on the AH with 10 stacks, you can shoot 3 arrows at once with it, just like the regular Terminator. Honestly, the Juju shortbow is an insane weapon. People say what they want about it. On a budget, it's ridiculously good. Make sure you've got Enderman Slayer 5 and you're good to go. Anyway, the last weapon that we have in today's video is the Glacial Scythe, or the Frozen Scythe, of course, depending on how many coins you have to spend. Both the Frozen Scythe and the Glacial Scythe essentially do the same thing, however, the Frozen Scythe gives you plus 80 damage and the Glacial Scythe gives you plus 120, also gives you a bit of intelligence, and its right-click ability is more powerful. To cut a long story short, what we use this Glacial Scythe for is its right-click ability, shoots 1 ice bolt that deals however much damage, and slows enemies for 5 seconds. When hitting the ground, also creates an explosion for 3 blocks, dealing the same damage. Imagine you could just basically fire a Hyperion from a little bit extra long range. I've actually made a completely individual video about this weapon not too long ago, so you should probably check that out if you're interested. Now its damage doesn't seem too crazy. However, you have to consider that the mana cost on this weapon is really low, especially even if you have ultimate wise, and you can spam this as pretty much as you want. Now, one thing to note is if you have an implosion belt, it'll increase your explosive damage by 25%, meaning that basically if you right click and do direct impact damage to a mob, as you can see I got 309k damage. If we go over to it and hit the ground first, we get 386k. So it increases our damage by 25% if you actually don't hit the mob directly, but hit the ground near them, meaning that the damage dealt is explosive damage rather than direct impact. And sure, it's got its competitors, for instance the Spirit Scepter. To be completely honest, the damage probably isn't too different. The Spirit Scepter will do slightly less. The cooldown is, once again, nothing, so you can spam it. However, the mana cost is much higher. Now, of course, if you have Ultimate Wise 5 on this Spirit Scepter, your mana cost is going to be 100. Ultimate Wise 5 on the Glacial Scythe is only 38, meaning that you're going to run out of mana a lot quicker using the Spirit Scepter. Now, if mana isn't an issue, then sure, the Spirit Scepter might not be a bad idea at all. But if I'm being completely honest, like I said before, the more money you spend, the more money you're going to have to spend to get basically smaller increases in damage. Just how the game works. And there's no dispute, the Glacial Scythe is better, it deals more damage. This weapon can actually stay with you for a very long time. Number one, it's usable in dungeons because it's dungeonizable. It is actually also usable in the Crimson Isles too, which is actually really nice, considering, I mean, something like killing flares, yeah, it's not the most efficient thing in the world if you compare it to a Hyperion, however, that's 2 billion coins. This is 45 mil, so you can't really complain. Especially the fact that you can actually kill flares with it, it's actually crazy. Anyway, let me know what you think of these weapons in the comments, the weapons that you've used or may give a try in the future. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.